Shalom Aleichem, Rabbi Isai. Agmar Chasim Tova, good year 577-5780. Should be a Shnas Geula. Hashem Yimali Kol Mishalis Libenu for all of Klal Yisrael L'Tova. Rabbi Isai, hopefully I have a very interesting program tonight. We're going to begin in just a moment with a very special guest, Rav Nosson Leiter, one of the premier Askonim, both in the Indian of Giyus, the Indian of morality, assisted suicide, and many, many other important areas, and especially the area of what's going on in New York State with the Chinuch, and he's going to give us an update on some of these issues. Afterwards, as is appropriate, this particular time of the year, I'm going to share with you some divrei Torah about Yom Kippur, and also about the Yom Noraim davening, and permit me shminis shebeshminis of gaiva of azas to kedusha, but I'm telling you that if you listen to this Torah, you'll have a deeper, enhanced understanding and appreciation of the very puzzling idea of a sor la'azazel, the chas v'shalom stay reshuyas, we're bribing the devil, Lucifer, vasidos. So we'll discuss that, and then we'll discuss some insights in and actually the nusach of tefillah, which will enhance your davening. And then, time permitting, that we should go to with a bechina of simcha, like it says in the Nesei Kelim and in the Meforshim by Rosh Hashanah, and the pasuk actually says, I think in Ezra, go and eat, etc., and have a certain amount of confidence. So we'll also have some music, maybe from my recently from my daughter's chasana, from the 11 boys. And maybe from what we did a week and a half ago when we were zoicha to do a kumzitz, a pre-Rosh Hashanah kumzitz by the tzaddik Rav Avram Steinberg. So we have a very exciting program. I'll let the proceedings begin now. Rabbi Leiter, Shalom Aleichem, a good year.
Good year. Thank you very much for having me once again.
No, thank you. I called up Rabbi Leiter around a half an hour ago on short notice, and I said, let's do it. And Rabbi Leiter made himself available. So the first thing I want to spend just 2 or 3 minutes, I know this was also mentioned in the Cultural Dispatch, or Dispatch from the Culture Wars, the article in the Jewish press, that there's an Ethiopian girl, and I understand that you actually, mamish, made phone contact with her before Rosh Hashanah, an Ethiopian girl who is the object of being tortured by the Zionist government to force a religious girl into the army, and that they've sentenced her to 31 days in prison. So tell us a little bit about this, and what did you hear from her? What did you discuss with her?
Okay, her name is Ziva Basmazel, and she actually was arrested twice. She is incontrovertibly religious, and they know it, and she's also very much needed at home because of the situation her parents are in. Her father's not well, and despite all that, but perhaps because of it, she's been targeted, apparently intentionally, by Israeli draft authorities. She even met, apparently she was encouraged to meet, erroneously so, with the deputy commander of Maytav, the Israeli draft division. And she's the one, apparently, that was instrumental in giving her this ridiculous 31-day sentence when she shouldn't be sitting at all. They know that she's religious. There's a technical matter. She supposedly gave in her paperwork a little late. You know, you might give someone a small fine, but you don't give them 31 days in jail. This is clearly an attempt to terrorize other girls, and it's also apparently part of an attempt to target the Ethiopian community in particular. And this policy, but targeting the Ethiopian community, was articulated by a lady by the name of Orna excuse my mispronunciation, Barbibai, on an official visit to Tfas. She was the head of IDF Manpower, and she described the policy of targeting the Ethiopians in immigration centers, absorption centers. And she also mentioned in that context limiting religious exemptions for religious girls. conditions that they need to be able to stay out of the army. So this is a policy that was articulated a number of years ago. It seems to be going into effect, and it was described as making racism great again. We know that the Israelis took in a variety of Sephardic immigrants and Timonim and used their disadvantage to target them in various ways, particularly with the Timonim. They kidnapped children, and it seems to be that this is what's operative again here. The anti-religious, rabid secularists that have been basically setting the tone for policy ever since the founding of the state, even though they're a tiny minority of the population, they're the ones that seem to be employing some sort of elitist racism against the Jews of color that don't fit in with their Ashkenazi WASP background. And Kiev is just one area that they're doing that. I want to just point out, first of all, I didn't get to spend a whole lot of time with her before Rosh Hashanah about matters that we can discuss openly, because her case is an ongoing case, but this is something that's a travesty for the Jewish people as a whole during Yom Kippur, that we have a young girl sitting, languishing in Israeli prison, but staying steadfast to her faith and refusing to take the easy way out, so to speak, and just to give in, succumb to the draft, even though she was being hit with an unusually stiff 31 days in military prison. And this is a blot on Klal Yisrael, so to speak, to the extent that we know about it. We are mechuyev to speak up and not let this recur, and ensure that the people in power feel the pressure to release her immediately.
So let me say this very, very briefly. We're going to move on from this particular situation, but the question to the listeners may be asking in their heads, and I'm going to answer this question. So there's a tachlis. What is the tachlis in hearing this? Rabbi say the tachlis in hearing this is that the avodah of how to make it through the Yom Neroyim effectively is in a certain way contingent on this young Ethiopian frum young woman. What do I mean? So a week ago, I was in Monsey for Shabbos visiting my parents. My mother should have a Fushalema, Masha Bas Matel, B'toich Shachali Yisrael, and I mentioned my name also, Yehuda ben Masha Fushalema, B'toich Shachali Yisrael. So I davened by Vlednik, and the Rav there at Shalashudah said a beautiful, beautiful thing. He said, Atem nitzovim, kulchem hayom. We know either the Chazal, the Swarm, they say hayom is Rosh Hashanah. So he said, b'shem some of the Hasidic Kadmonim, that kulchem is obviously the entirety of Klal Yisrael, as is enumerated in the pasuk. So basically, we know that the Zohar says that you're not supposed to pray for your own needs on Rosh Hashanah. The Zohar famously says, "Soya can kakal be have, give. They ask and give us this, give us that." That's not what it's about. It's supposed to be about being Mamlech Hashem, Kvod Shemayim. Parenthetically, Rabbi Yisrael Salanter 150 years ago said that we're not holding there, so we do have to ask. But we have to ask within the Bechina of Lemancha Likim Chayim, that give us this and give us that and give us the other thing, so that we should be able to serve you better, a pshara of sorts. So the Vlednik has said, I don't know if it was his own or from Chassidus Swarm, but it's beautiful. Even if you want to hold like the Zohar, that you're not allowed to be mispala for your own needs, you have to be selfless, not selfish. But when you're mispala for another person's needs, that you're allowed to do. And we know how mispala bat chaver who tzarich lo yisedava who nanatchila. So here's a methodology that's perfectly legitimate, even to adhere to the Zohar without the Rebbe Yisrael Salanta. He didn't mention the Rebbe Yisrael Salanta. So I'm just refining it a drop and saying it it's really a pithy pasuk. V'ahavta l'reyacha kamoicha ani Hashem. The way to get to the ani Hashem, which we so desperately need every minute of our day, 24/7, but certainly during the Aseret Yimei Tshuva, to reestablish our rapprochement and to reestablish our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is through the vehicle of Yahavta L'Reyacha Kamoicha Ani Hashem. So, Krichnish of the God event, seid nicht zu fromm, Tzadik, and the Heilige, and the this and the that, get down to brass tacks. So that's why I say, how many of us, we can't do anything about Giyas in Eretz Yisrael. What can we do about the Yeshiva guys? What can we do about the daughters? What can we do about the things here? And what can we do about this? And what can we do? The answer is not what can we do. Hashem gave you a mouth. He gave you a brain. He gave you a heart. He gave you a hashkafa. He gave you a pasuk v'ahavta l'reyacha kamoicha. Will you mispalel for these people? Imagine if the 5 or 10 or more thousand people who are listening to this radio program tonight in the middle of the Aseret Yimei Tshuva, many of them are ladies and young ladies preparing for Shabbos. Imagine if every single person were to daven for this young lady and for others. Preventive medicine, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Imagine what we could accomplish in terms of the Giyas issue. So forever after, take the claptrap, take the balderdash, take the Bobenmeises, take the bologna, walk over to the sanitation kufsa in your house and put it all there. When you want to say, we can't do anything, what can we do? Please deposit it in the garbage can, because we just told you at the very minimum what you can do. And perhaps as we go along to the next subject, which is the subject of the Gezeres on the Chinuch in New York State, perhaps we can refine that a little bit more. So let's move on to that next subject.
Thank you very much for that. And just again, her name is Ziva Zayin Yud Vav Hey Bas Mazel.
Bas Mazel?
Mazel, right.
Ziva Bas Mazel.
Okay, thank you. And as far as the Gezeres Chinuch, reportedly there will be a vote by the New York State Board of Regents on the educational equivalency regulations as are known this coming Tuesday, Erev Yom Kippur, in Albany. And those that are not familiar, we'll just recap a little bit. In 2010, the New York State Legislature passed a law which required public school children to be indoctrinated into the LGBT propaganda, requiring respect for flagrant violators of Tolevo, including obviously the LGBT types of flagrant sinners. And this, of course, includes those that are in violation of the most abominable of all the abominations, namely Mishka Zohar, which, among all the different arayos listed in Perek Yud Ches, at the end of Achronos, that's the only one. Mishka Zohar is the only one that, in the very enumeration, is described as Tolevo. The others, in general terms, 4 different times at the end of Perek Yud Ches are described as Tolevis, but the only one in its enumeration that's described as Tolevis is Mishka Zohar. And that, of course, is the one that's being advocated most strongly for
I mean, if I could just interject for a moment, you see HaKadosh Baruch Hu's juxtaposition. The main thing, as we've been saying from this podium here, this program, for some time now, the main thing, the biggest threat of all, is this 801A, and the biggest pushers are, it's not Yafet. Yafet is a problem, but Yafet is not the problem. Yafet is being used by the homosexualists, the Mishkevei Zohar, and those who support the agenda, one of Kairos, and that was the 801A that basically said that you have to teach these things in terms of civics, derech eretz, respect, tolerance and respect, etc. This is the main goal that they're trying to accomplish. And therefore, it's very fitting that it's Erev Yom Kippur, and the next day, Johnny come lately, La'achar Maisa, all of Asheni Yidden are going to go to shul, and what are we going to read by Mincha? We're going to read by Mincha all of these arayos and everything else, and we're going to all piously shake our heads, and none of us are going to make the connection. Why are we in this tzara? with these regulations, which by this time will chas v'shalom already be officially voted in to be promulgated. Why are we in it? We're in it because because we did nothing about these things. Because in Eretz Yisrael, as long as they're not drafting from yeshivish girls, no, if they take some, they pick off some Taimani girls, some Ethiopian girls, some Swedish girls, some Mizrahi girls, it's not the with us. And in the public schools, you know what? Those Jews who went to public school, they'll be force-fed all the schmutz, and they'll grow up to have screwed up values, antithetical to Torah, to Yiddishkeit, to morality. No, they shouldn't have sent to public school. But in shiny Yidden, you see the same Zustel. It's the same kind of thing, the same exclusiveness that you find in Israel, that subtle racism that Rabbi Leiter was referring to the people of color within the Jewish community. It's the same thing here that the Democrats are doing with the black people and with the Hispanics, with the various colorations, if you will, that really they try to keep them down on the plantation, make sure that they do not rise up, they do not get too educated, they do not become Republicans and conservatives. We'll keep them in poverty, we'll keep throwing bones to them, we'll encourage them, in effect, through the welfare system, not to get ahead, etc., etc. We're not going to go into it, but you understand, there's no Chedushim, Rabbi Isai. What's happening in Eretz Yisrael, what's happening in America, what's happening in America, it's happening in Eretz Yisrael, this cross-pollination, and this is what we're dealing with. Go ahead, Rabbi. I'm sorry for the interruption. Please go on.
Yes, that was definitely a much needed interruption. Thank you for accentuating those critical points. And I think that we have to understand that Hashem Mimanachnu, we, knowingly or not knowingly, are responsible for the situation that we're in, not only in terms of ruchnis, but even practically speaking, because the law which mandates the main threat that we're facing from these regulations, which is 801A, Section 801A in education law, which is modified by the passage of the Dignity for All Students Act in 2010. That happened, that was passed because the firm establishment not only did not fight it, but they actually allowed and even supported these types of candidates that ultimately wound up getting elected, knowing what they would do when this legislation would come up. And they, not only that, they supported them after they voted for this. And what type of message does that send? It sends the message, like you described, that the firm establishment has fully embraced the Kantist ideology, which is that they have basically broadcast people in government. As long as you give us what we really want, money and power for ourselves, we will sacrifice the Jews on the periphery, all those Jews that are in the public schools, including the Orthodox Jews in public schools, which for some reason we only hear about when it comes to the Chomas Israel raising money to save them, which is important. But we don't hear about all those Jews in the public schools when it comes to supporting politicians who are perpetrating Zeres al-Hadas against those very same children in the public school system by subjecting them to LGBT dogma. So because we showed the government and HaKadosh Baruch Hu that we don't care about other people's kids, we are getting it now ourselves. We baked our cake and now we're eating it. We should recognize that. As the Rambam says, when we have the communal Torah, we need to do introspection. As the Rambam at the beginning of Philistines. And we know that the Eibusher works mida keneged mida. And as the Nefesh Chaim explains in Ruach HaM Pirkei Avos, Perik Daled, Mishnah Yudaled, depending on which division of Pashayas you use, that the reason, or a reason that Eibusher established mida keneged mida as a primary operative principle in Hashgacha, in Hanogas Olam Hazeh, is that in order that we should be able to learn from the Hanoga to identify the averas for which punishments have ensued. As the Gemara says in Brachos Daf Hey, that when a person sees Yisurin coming onto him, he should engage in introspection to identify what he did that process would be appropriate for the specific types of Yisurim that he is enduring, the particular troubles and tribulations that he is being subject to. So this is something we're supposed to do for our own benefit, identify what we can do to improve ourselves, to lift ourselves to these sorrows. Hashem doesn't send us sorrows just to suffer; He sends it ba'avo.
I want to make this. I want to make this point. A little while ago, one of our activists had a conversation with Rabbi Yisrael Reisman, who, together with Rabbi Brudny and Rabbi Yankel Bender, these were the three names that we see who were writing op-ed pieces, and from the younger generation. They're not so young anymore. These are people who are over 65 years old already. And they are the ones who are basically leading this struggle. And the young man, the Askin, put it to Rabbi Reisman, 801A, with this schmutz and this and that. And at this point already, Rabbi Reisman was aware of it, but in the council of the people running this thing, they decided they are not going to emphasize this. They are not going to make this a strong point. Aleph. Beis. Isn't it Modna? All of us can remember going out to Washington, D.C. There was one time that something was going on in Israel, and we were called to run to Washington, D.C., and 50 to 100,000 of us, I don't remember, came out there. And then there was one or two Tehillim rallies that we held on Sundays. All the yeshivas came out in Manhattan, and we said 10 kapitel of Tehillim. So I want to ask a question. If they feel, the powers that be, that this is such a serious sakana and a threat, why is it that we didn't forget about getting together and making a machar in Albany, getting together and making a machar in Manhattan? I don't remember seeing that we should even hear a simple letter, a letter from Agudath Israel of America and from other meisters asking that one or two kapitel of Tehillim should be said for the Askanim, for the Hatzlacha. In other words, what exactly? Where is our stick? Where is our muscle? Where is our ruchniistic muscle? Where is a tolas? Tolas, the kaich is bepeh, the worm is with the peh. Tolas Yaakov, not even garnish, zero. So what do we expect over here? What do we expect? And why are we going to be adjudicated on this Tzibur Indian? Why are we going to be adjudicated in a favorable manner when none of us, not our rabbis, not our askanim, not the Hamoin Am, almost none of us have really done what we're supposed to do? I just don't. To me, it's staggering. Now, let me ask you, Rabbi Leiter. We spoke off the air. The concept of pearls, the organization that is spearheading this thing, I don't know if it's an Aguda branch or unofficially or whatever, but it's called Pearls. And it was so choshev pearls that the great Satmara Asken, Rav David Niederman, was out of town, and he took the time and made sure we all knew this in his hotline call to tell us how wichtig it is that we should donate money to pearls. Now, I love Rav David Niederman. He did a lot for the Russians. He did a lot with Rav Tuv. He's done a lot of good things. He's also done terrible, terrible things in terms of the politicians and the lekerai and getting Yidden to be over by voting for all the shmutz. So if Rav David Niederman says we Niederman, hey man, we need to give money to pearls, I already think that's 50% of the reason not to give any money to pearls. Now, what's this pearls, and what are they going to do with the money? What are they going to do with the money?
Well, I mean, if you ask what they'll do with the money, I assume that they'll keep it. But I think that it's quite ironic that the very same people, the very same crowd of the Aguda people and the Niederman types that helped get us into this problem and help ensure that we don't even understand what the true problem is and what the real threat is, and that the same people that have ensured that we don't fight the problem in a manner that would be most effective, those same people are raising money for themselves, of course, to help advance the agenda of the very same people that are at the offensive end of this assault against Pinuch, meaning that they've even apparently offered a olive branch to our sworn spiritual enemies to cooperate with them in designing curriculum to satisfy demands that everyone knows have nothing to do with what they really want. They've offered to make Common Core compliant curriculum, which is a separate issue which I'd like to discuss if we have time. But the very fact that they are offering to improve curriculum as if it is somehow addressing the demands of the New York State Democratic establishment is itself ludicrous. Because if they want to improve anything that needs improvement within, the secular curriculum as a need that we have in our own communities, that could be done and should be done independent of the demands of the people that are trying to transform education into LGBT indoctrination. What is afoot now has nothing to do with education. It has nothing to do with Jewish education or secular education. It's about indoctrination. And we see this most clearly in the public schools in New York City, where recently guidelines have been issued enforcing a terrible regimen of transgender insanity on the youngest of children, to the extent that I understand that some children have even been pushing back against it. And liberals have been complaining about how little kids are being forced into same-gender bathrooms and, all sorts of terrible things that are happening there. Kids are forced to refer to other children by their gender of choice. So this is what we're looking at. This is what they want. This is, again, has absolutely nothing to do with education. In fact, it's the very opposite of what education is, which is educating people about reality, biological or otherwise.
So let me just say this. The Chazal say Chochma b'goyim taimen. When it comes to tuition tax credits, the Aguda and the OU is very friendly. Rabbi Hirsch Weinrib had a whole powwow with Cardinal Dolan almost 10 years ago when he was the head of the OU about tuition tax credits. For this, they know how to cooperate with the Katholische. There's no problems, etc., etc. But to go to the Muslims and the evangelicals and the Catholics and to say, let's have a massive demonstration against 801A and the Dignity of Students Act when it's coming into the private schools, the religious schools, that we should be the tail that wags the dog, that we should be the Kiddush Hashem, anechtige Tag. We're not capable of doing this. There's not an interest in doing this. There's not a thought to do this. It's the same thing like that video that was on the YouTube for years when there was in the middle of the Mitzisa B'Peh crisis, and you had a long table with Hisachtas Harabunim meeting the strategy of how to fight for Mitzitzu B'Peh. And the big chiddush was the two Satmarer brothers were sitting at the same table. Whoa! But did anybody say there, Ma usuluni eleikim buzei? Why does Hashem make such a gezerah of Mitzitza B'Peh in New York? It's not Saskatchewan. It's not Dubuque, Iowa. It's the Yerushalayim outside of Yerushalayim where there's so much Torah and Chesed and everything else. And the answer would be, well, let's go by Mida Keneged Mida. If it's a gezerah wegen Yesod, so hat sich getan mit Bris Miller, es hat sich getan mit Snee, es hat sich getan mit Kedushas Abris. So hat sich getan, was mir stimmt für alle die Politicians, was machen die Gay-Rights mit anderen Schmutz. This was too much to expect this from the Hisachtas Harabunim. Just 1 second, please. We pause for 1 second. So I'm saying, what were you saying, Rabbi Leiter? Please continue.
Just saying that mention they didn't mention the fact that you have people like Moshe Turner, mass molesters, walking around Muncie, and you have certain so-called Shani Eden even numbering themselves among one of the Rabbonai Yoir that are backing them. And certainly they didn't mention that as one of the things that we should be introspecting about when it comes to the gears against children and Midas Hayesod.
So basically, let me speed this up because we're already at the half-hour mark. So I know that you told me, and I'm going to make it very succinct for you. I know you told me that one of the big backers of Common Core is Bill and Melinda Gates, and you told me that in 2001, when they started their foundation, one of the people that they were glorifying, one of the organizations, was with a woman who died in the 1950s, but she used to write things about destroying, in other words, limiting or eliminating Orthodox Judaism and all kinds of other chazarai like that. So you brought me a raya basically to say, listen, without getting into the nitty gritty of what Common Core is, but Common Core is supported and is cited and is promoted and promulgated by people who are antithetical and anathema to religious Judaism and to a lot of traditional values. And therefore, the idea that now pearls will try to kiss up, to machapshura with evil by saying, look, we'll collect money from the Haimi Jews, that they should give money to pearls, which they can give to save girls from abortions in Eretz Yisrael or whatever, or girls from the army. Instead, we'll give it to pearls so that they can have pearls of wisdom to make a curriculum. Look, we spent $50,000, $100,000 making a curriculum that's very coordinates with Common Core, as if that's what the libs, the oisva from the anti-Torah, anti-hashkafa, anti-morality people, the pro-Mishkav Zacha people are interested in. In other words, they continue to take us for stupids. And I want to make this point. In business, I said this a few weeks ago, around 4 to 6 weeks ago. In business, if for 40 years a businessman had some of his top advisors who were giving terrible advice, and when they did a forensic examination of the books, they found out that billions of dollars were lost from the business that could have been much more successful. And instead, it's not successful because certain people were going with fallacious policies. And I want to call out the fallacious policy with the biggest respect. I know that I'm speaking Naser Simei Tshuva, and I'm not speaking about the godless and Askonis and the tzidkis of Reb Moshe Shera, Olav Hashem Zechrein Livrocha. But in the area of morality, I've documented it. He had a fallacious, mistaken, errant Rabbi Shera philosophy of kissing up to the liberal politicians, the Solas and the Shumas. It's all quoted in this book. And the result is that we have the Zweibels and the Avi Shafrans and the whole kit and caboodle and the Josh Melmans and the Leon Goldenbergs and the Chatzkel Bennett's and all the other toadies doing the same thing at this late stage in the developing culture. And nobody has said, we're wrong, Aval Hashem Manachnu. In other words, Chochma B'Goyim Taimin, in society, these people would have been fired. They would have been disciplined. They would have had to be contrite and apologize. No! We're the leaders. We make the conventions, and we're telling you where to give your money to pearls, and we're deciding not to push the chaos, and we're deciding not to have Tehillim rallies, and we're deciding not to stand outside Albany, and we're deciding there should be no Mesiras Nefesh. Ad Masai. So, Rabbi Leiter, very briefly, what was your idea about Mesiras Nefesh a little bit?
Well, thank you for bringing that issue of the donations made by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to the New Group of World Service.org, as documented on the ngws.org website in late 2001, and that organization was founded by Alice A. Bailey Yamasumo, who in one of her 24 books, Externalization of the Hierarchy, page 544 and 551, identifies one of the major goals as the gradual dissolution, if in any way possible, of the Orthodox Jewish faith. And if that's the type of person that Alice Bailey is, what type of person is someone who donates to their organization? And if they didn't know, who knows what else they don't know about it? Coupled with the fact, of course, that Time Magazine had a we do know with public record that the Gateses are strong proponents of negative social change. In fact, Mrs. Gates recently admitted that what keeps her up at night is one word: contraceptives. That's what she's thinking about. So these are not the people that should be designing a educational curriculum for anybody. Not adults, and certainly not children, and certainly not religious people, and certainly not our children. And why is it that they're selling out to our enemies by compromising with them on helping our enemies advance their anti-Chinuch agenda in a more deceptive way?
So
why is that something that we tolerate, and why is it something that we should be paying them to do? Anyway, I'm sorry. So, getting back to what you asked.
The bottom line, we have only literally 60 to 90 seconds. What do you propose if you were running Pearls, if you were running the opposition at this late stage? What are you suggesting that the Tzibur does specifically?
Well, I would, of course, concur with what you're talking about, getting together, making mass demonstrations, but even a small minority of Orthodox Jews who demonstrate a willingness, a sincereness, a sincerity to employ whatever mysterious method it takes, and that if we make it clear that we're not going to be led astray by the false leaders, the Niedermans and the other people, and that we will abide by the halacha, which is to be moser nefesh, to give up our lives if necessary, to avoid teaching our own children or anyone else's children heretical ideas or there's no fear. That type of mysterious nefesh itself is what will stop the Gzeira, and in my opinion, nothing else will. As long as they see that a significant minority, even if it's very small, of religious Jews is willing to resist by all means necessary, I think that itself will stave off the Gzeira, because even the anti-Semitic element, the anti-Jewish element in the government is not interested in evoking any sort of mass resistance by identifiably Jewish groups, even very small. Individuals, yes, that they can deal with, and they'll be more than willing to collaborate with the capos and the firm establishment to take individuals and make them sacrificial lambs if individuals wind up running afoul of the truancy laws. If there are mostes that are not complying with the Toeva indoctrination agenda and insist on keeping their kids there, people will be prosecuted for being truants, and that could result not only in incarceration, but in stealing away the kids, kidnapping the children, and giving them to who knows what type of quote-unquote families. And they would try to make an example of a few Yechidim that would be most nefesh. Our job is to make sure that they're not Yechidim. Our job is to make sure that they know that we're going to stand together as a group, and even if it's a small minority, it's going to be a group that's identifiably a group of religious Jews, and if they see that type of resistance, they're not interested in that. And that's something that I think is pivotal in stopping this Gzeira al Hadas.
Okay, Rabbi Leiter, we reached almost the 40-minute stage, and I have some other things to cover. So I want to thank you very, very much for being with us, and we'll be discussing this again in the very near future. We'll be elaborating as we see how things shuckle out Erev Yom Kippur, and then we will definitely talk again. So I want to thank you so much for being with us, and have a Gemach Simut Tova and everything good, and Hashem should give you koiches to continue to do your very special work.
Thank you so much once again for your sentinel work.
All the best. Kol Tov. Rabbi, I just want to continue now with a few quick things. Number one, in the Haaretz has an English. Haaretz is a left-wing Israeli paper, Shreklicha to the left, and they have an English edition, and they did a story about a lesbian who is in the Five Towns area, in the Hempstead area, with the modern Orthodox area, and she decided to get married to her partner. She decided she's still Orthodox, and it seems that Rabbi Kellemer, the Rav of the Young Israel of Hempstead, and another rabbi, whose name I forget, from another shul, they basically were very upset. It seems, although they're denying it now, but it seems that they was upset with the fact that the Long Island Jewish World, a newspaper, had an article about this. And so in many of the eateries and the places where the Long Island Jewish World used to be sold or distributed, suddenly they weren't there. And this is so what did the lesbian do? She went to a Chinese kosher restaurant, and she made a minyan there called the Havas Yisrael, where not everybody there were queers and lesbians and Mishigayim, but there was certainly everybody there supported this kind of stuff. This is what we're dealing with. So we want to give credit to Rabbi Kellemer and the other rabbi. The first one was Rabbi Pearl, and then his replacement, I don't remember his name exactly, with an S. And we want to thank them, and we hope that they keep strong. We hope that they keep strong. And it's nice to see that there's a bit of a loyal opposition, and we see how far afield things are going between YU a few Sundays ago, where the Mishka Vayailach, the tail wags the dog, and Ari Berman, the chancellor, capitulates and says, we're going to have meetings, we're going to see, we're going to do, we're going to talk, we're going to be more inclusive. And how many Rosh Yeshivas from YU, from Rabbi Herschel Schachter and all the way down, did they even give drushes? Did they speak out? Did they speak to the media? They had to pull teeth to get 2 or 3 sentences in the article in the Jewish press. To pull teeth, they heard from Rabbi Tenber and one other rabbi. So this is what's happening in the modern Orthodox. But why do we blame the modern Orthodox? Look at the Chazarai and the garbage that we're doing or we're not doing. Look how we turn the other cheek to all the immorality for the last 40, 50 years since Stonewall. Okay, now listen to here. Here we have a news roundup. Won't take more than a minute or two. A judge blocks a Georgia heartbeat bill. The Georgia heartbeat bill says that as soon as the fetus's heartbeat can be detected, you can't make an abortion, which is roughly at the 40-day time, 42 days, which is very much like the Chazal that speaks about for the first 40 days by a Yid, it's considered Maya Ba'alma. But after 40 days, it's already considered something. It's very interesting. That's when the heartbeat kicks in. So now a judge is blocking that. But the chiddush is that at this late stage in the developing culture, Georgia legislatures and the governor passed a heartbeat bill. Their cheshbon is to try to put pressure on the Supreme Court to eventually overturn Roe versus Wade that legalized most abortions. How about this one? A Virginia teacher who was fired because he or she, I think, refused to use transgendered crazy pronouns. If some man, a boy, a kid says, I identify as a lady, and some lady says, I identify as a man, you should have to use these pronouns. And because the teacher wouldn't do this, the teacher was fired. She's suing now for $1 million. Kol hakavod. When was the last time we saw something like that from our Askonim? What's the matter? We don't have enough lawyers? We don't have enough? Yes, Rabbi Schwartz, Dr. Schwartz, the Lubavitcher. So he did, and he's winning. He's winning. The New York City Council backed off. They were saying he can't give therapy to some adult who comes to him and says, I have same gender attractions and I want to deal with them. So the city council made a law, you're not allowed to do that if you're getting paid. So he challenged it with a Christian group and with a Jewish guy. And Lemaisa, the city council realized that chances are they would lose in court. So in order not to hurt the system, so there's a victory for Rabbi Schwartz. It wasn't Aguda doing the challenging. It wasn't OYO doing the challenging. It was a Yachid doing the challenging. And Baruch Hashem, the Goyish law firms came in, basically. How about this headline? Barbie, the famous Barbie dolls that all the Vayailach play with and the boys play with for years already. They're meanders. Now Barbie is making the first transgender dolly, a little brainwashing, right? I think there should be a gewaltige boycott of all the Barbie products. In Michigan, there's a petition to ban the practice of abortion, which involves dismembering the baby. You know what they do in the abortion? They stick inside into the birth canal where the baby is inside the mother. They stick in scissors with suction cups and they cut the baby to pieces. Well, since it's such a barbarism, it's a Nazism. So the Umas Ha'olam in Michigan are offended by this. So they're collecting enough petitions to force it to be on the ballot, hundreds of thousands, to be on the ballot in the next election to ban, to outlaw, to prohibit this kind of horrific barbarism. They're 50% of the way there. Again, Chachma b'Goyim Taimen. What are we doing? All of these are signals to us. How about this one? How about this one? Trump, in his UN speech last week, spoke about religious freedom, religious liberty, and God, and everything was good until he started to talk about the gayachs. And we have to see to it in all the countries of the world, there should be gayachs, there should be freedom to fornicate, gayachs wise, etc., etc. That's what he lost us. So we have to understand Trump is no tzaddik. We have to understand that. We have to be keenly aware of that. We can't make him into the Mashiach. Now, that's exactly like Netanyahu. Netanyahu, yeah, he's a brave, he's a good, he's a very talented person. He's a murderous speaker. He inspires confidence. He's a macho man. But he gets up in front of the UN, he gets up in public venues, in the Congress, wherever it is, and these Palestinians and these Arabs, they're against the gays. We are tolerant of the gays. Yeah, he forgets about the Torah Takar. This Oisrov, who himself was a Noyev, who was well known with an Italian shiksa. He was on the front pages many years ago. This Noyev, you understand, he's speaking and promoting the gayachs internationally. Chilul Hashem. Tonight I had an interesting situation, Rabbi say. Tonight I had a very interesting situation. The interesting situation was, you know how Hashem talks to us with a baskol? Hashem talks to us with a baskol. When we overhear a conversation, it's a little bit of a baskol. It's supposed to jog us, tip us into doing something. When we see something. So listen to this. Let me just drink l'chaim. I made the bracha before the broadcast. I had to get gas tonight. So I walked into the gas station to pay. As I was walking out, there's a paper, either the Post or the Daily News. It's mamish open to a page, and there's one thin column. And the thin column says like this, the story. It caught my eye because it said, XXX, freedom of speech. So it said like this. From the Giuliani era, when they were cleaning up Times Square and all the schmutz, they started to enforce the indecency laws of schmutziger adult entertainment places, and they can't be within 500 feet of a school and this and that. So the mushchasim, the adult schmutz industry, they were fighting back. So a court of appeals, which might be one of the highest courts or the highest court in New York State, I'm not sure, they ruled for morality, believe it or not. So what just happened now, a federal judge came out. You see, they cherry pick, they find these liberal federal judges. So the federal judge came out and said, these ideas from the Giuliani era, way back in the 90s, and et cetera, this is passe, this is finished. These are not the standards anymore. He says if we keep and enforce this thing, that you can't have schmutz thing within 500 feet of a school or whatever, a religious institution, entertainment places, and all of Manhattan. I saw this for two reasons. Number one, because I had to do a radio program, and Hashem wants me to show you people out there what's going on. Be very careful when you let your kids go into Manhattan to go shopping, the girls or the boys or this or that. Be very, very careful. Was this and just to see the Chazarai. And then there's another point. How come Yehuda Levin? I don't have a secretary. I don't have a penny to my name. I don't have an office. I know about this. I know about this. Because Hashem makes us know. What a good that has a multi-million-dollar budget. OU that has a multi-billion-dollar budget, and they have and Agud has the Abba Cohens in New York and Washington, and they have this Knacker in New York, and the Lefkowitz, and they have this one, they have Ganser, Avi Shafrin, the writers, the lawyers, the whole business. You think they're going to make a sound about this? Will they call a public press conference? Will they call up the cardinal and say, Cardinal, come down with the Novominsker rabbi? Stand up and speak up for morality at a press conference. When was the last time you saw a press conference where I could have worked behind the scenes? Yeah, the behind is very emphasized. I don't know what scenes we're talking about. This is Chazarai. You have to capitulate. You have to make compromises with the Common Core curriculum and this and that. That you'll do. But what about the fact it's not the 1950s anymore when you didn't feel confident to make public displays at press conferences? Maybe it's time not to make your statements that once in a while it gets into the newspaper, but usually it's thrown in the garbage, except it appears in the Jewish Haimi newspapers. I give they can show they're doing something. Oh, you could show they're doing something. What about public press conferences with politicians and morality, with religious leaders? So those are the two reasons that I saw this article. And by the way, the Jewish Coalition for Values has some very good people, Rabbi Menken, Rabbi Gordimer, Dov Fish. They write articles, they do gewaldige things, but they don't have the guts to come out and say, Aval Hashemim Anachnu, as long as Rabbi Schoenfeld and Rabbi Wexler and others, Welcher, and others in Queens allow a schnook, Daniel Rosenthal, to vote, a representative assemblyman to vote for all the schmutz. As long as the Borough Park rabbinate allows Eichenstein and Felder to vote for all the schmutz, and nobody from the coalition will condemn them. This is verboten. I spoke to one of their people 6 months ago, and they absolutely won't touch it with a 6-foot pole. Are they better when compared to the OU and Aguda? Let's give them a big hand. They're better. I gave you a mushal. When somebody kills 20 people, and then another guy comes and I'm a tzaddik, I only killed 2 people. Or I didn't kill him, I didn't do a physical act. What do you mean? The coalition's doing great things, the Coalition for Jewish Values. Yeah. There's 2 ways of killing somebody. You can kill somebody by taking a gun and shooting him, or by not giving him food and sustenance, you're also killing him. All right? By not speaking out on this thing, the coalition is going to have to give a din v'cheshbon. You hear Rabbi Schoenfeld, Rabbi Menken, my dear friend Rabbi Gordimer, and everybody else is in the leadership position there. You're going to have to give a din v'cheshbon for not pointing out to us the connection between the low-life politicians we support, who are in the Jewish community neighborhoods, who we continue to support, and who voted for a lot of the schmutz, and then Va'al Kulam on the schmutz of these guys themselves, the fruma that I listed. That's what's going on. That was my baskal. Rabbi Isai, I'm not going to even have time to tell you the whole Torah. The Torah of Sol Azazel. Does this make sense? So the Shtei Rishuyas here, we're sacrificing. And what kind of a sacrifice is this to the Satan that he gets all tickled pink? You take an animal, you push it over a cliff. By the time it gets halfway down, it's broken into a sack of broken bones. And how does that make the Satan that the Chazal say, the Midrashim say that the Satan, he starts to praise Klal Yisrael and he says they're Gevaldik. And why did it have to be they sent it biyad ish iti? What is the ish iti? So ish iti is, the Kleyoko says, it's iti from the word ace. A man whose time is up, he's not going to live throughout the year. So you take a man who's facing death, you send him to lead this cow, the Sol Azazel, you throw it over the cliff, and somehow that makes everything good. What's Pshat? So what's Pshat Azazel? Imagine the Satan is going, Azazel, Satan's going, today Hashem said, this is the day I can be Makatrik, and he's dancing down the road. He's going to be Makatrik on Klal Yisrael, the Yechidim and the Tzibur. And all of a sudden, some little angel, some little devil angel, an assistant to the Satan, comes and says, Satan, do you know what happened? The Jews just sent the sacrifice. They're pushing over the cliff. Asar Azazel. He says, Azazel, wait a second. I remember Azazel. Uzzah and Azazel. Azazel. These were Malachim, or Shmei or whatever his name was, and Azazel. These are 2 Malachim that they told Hashem, you see, we told you not to make the world exist because the people, they're doing Averis and everything else. So Hashem says, you could do better. He said, yeah, we'll be a Kiddush Hashem. So Hashem put them down. They called them the Nephilim, the ones that fell down to earth. And it says in the Parashah Bereshis, these are the great men who took women to themselves. They did arayas, etc., etc. So one of them did tshuva, this malach, and he's hanging in the sky, whatever this means. This is esoteric in the Zohar. And the other one is bound up in chains in the Har Tzafon in the northern mountains, and if he gets loose, he can make a big tsar. So the Satan is in Melech Zaken Exil. He's an old man. He knows from the beginning, the dawn of history. He remembers what happened to Uzzah and Azarel. He remembers this. He remembers they're chained up. They're hanging upside down the sky. They got punished big time. So the Satan says, I know that I go too far. Hashem assigned me a job assignment to tempt man. But he said on a Richter scale of 1 to 10, I could tempt a man up to 5. But I got too much of a geschmack, and I tempted them up to 7. I did it with other mechava. Maybe it was too much when I had other achava being mizana with the nachash. Whatever the thing was, I went too far. So maybe Azazel, maybe this Yom Kippur, maybe I'm going to come and prosecute the Jews, and then Hashem is going to say the same thing to me. You're prosecuting the Jews. You could do better. What about this, and that? And I know that eventually, I know Hashem is going to, at the end of time, so maybe this is going to be the time, maybe this is a trap. So he gets all afraid. So when he hears Sor Azazel, he hears the word Azazel, then he sees the picture of it. What is the Sor Azazel? Is it a fat cow sacrifice that the people eat it? No. You send it with a dead man, a man who's going to be dying in the next few months within the year, a Ish Iti. So it's already a depressing, a dead man, and he's taking a cow that's going to be pushed down the cliff and broken bones. He's going to fall down the cliff. Uzav Azael, they were in the film, they fall down, and boy, did they get it at the end. So all of a sudden, Satan realizes the only way to get out of this is Hashem deals midah connected midah. So if I'm being overkill and prosecuting the Jews, he'll be overkill with me. Hashem will show my hypocrisies or my shortcomings, and I'll be finished. And now it's after hearing the Tkiyah Shofar from Elul all the way until for 40 days until Yom Kippur. It used to be in the time of the Egel, after the Chet Egel, and now it's for 30 days in Elul, and it was Rosh Hashanah and this and that. So he's all shook up from all of that stuff. Remember, like the Chazal say, maybe Hashem is going to send the Malach. I'm sorry, maybe Hashem is going to send Mashiach, and that something's going to be finished. So remember, so now he's doubly afraid when he hears Azazel, so he can't prosecute on Yom Kippur. And then, what he does is he says, you know what? I'm going to praise the Jewish people. There's no sin in the Jewish people. They're not eating. They're like malachim. They stand on one foot because they put their foot together by kedusha. All the various midrashim. So that's pshat and sol azazel. That is the strategy. It's not a shtei reshuyos. It's to shake up the Satan and to give us a chizik that someday the Satan is going to be like the Azazel. He's going to get his upcoming uppins and etc. And on Yom Kippur, a day where we're like malachim and he's going downhill. It's the time to be mechazik and to make good New Year's resolutions. Okay, in the final moments, I'm going to try to give you a little bit of music. It won't be on the YouTube, but it will be on the radio program. Agamar Chasim Rabbi Say.